There is no doubt that worthiness is important in our ability to rise up. But what exactly is worthiness? And how can we learn how to overcome the myriad of beliefs we carry about ourselves and our possibilities? Thais Sky's Worthy Women Rise is a 4-month signature program for emerging leaders, seekers, and visionaries who want to learn the tangible tools to dismantle the worthiness wound and take up greater space as a self-expressed woman. Because this is our time. Go to thaissky.com/worthy. Again, that's thaissky.com/worthy. Reclaim is a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter, with your host, Thais Sky. Together, we will explore the questions of what does it look like to reclaim our sovereignty, our worthiness, our voices as women in this messy world. No topics are barred as we offer roundtable discussions on life, spirituality, politics, and what it means to be a woman in the modern age. Let's do this. Hello, everybody. Thais Sky here, your host for Reclaim, a podcast where we have conversations that matter. Today, I have with me Chris Zydel, and we talk about reclaiming creativity, and we talk about reclaiming self-expression. So stay tuned. That's coming up in just a moment. But first, what am I thinking about? Well, today is a big day. This week is actually a big week because the doors open for my signature program, Worthy Women Rise, this week. And if you know anything about me at all, you know that I've been coaching for a little while. And coaching to me is not just something I do for a living, but it's actually something that feels like a deep karmic honoring. When I'm coaching, when I'm running these groups, when I'm doing this work, I feel like I'm fulfilling a deeper, I just want to say prophecy, but that's definitely not the word I'm looking for. But yeah, a deep calling within me. It feels like a privilege to get to do this. And it's hard. Entrepreneurship is hard. And I'm willing to do all the other parts of entrepreneurship that I don't enjoy so that I get to honor my purpose by doing this coaching stuff. And, you know, when I think about coaching and when I think about what I'm best at, when I think about women's psychology and women's empowerment, it feels to me more than just purpose. It feels to me like art. To me, being in a one-on-one session feels like an opportunity for me to create something really beautiful in this relationship. And I love looking at what I do as art. And maybe there's something that's art in your life that you may have never considered it to be art. But now you're like, you know what? Yeah, I feel some deep connection with this thing. It could be painting like Chris, or it could be anything. It could be dancing in your bedroom. It could be what you actually do for a living. It could be traveling. I feel like we all have an art form. So as I'm launching this program into the world, I'm thinking about how we have to be courageous with our art, because our art is going to ask a lot of us. Our art is going to ask us to stay up early hours of the morning so that we can perfect this one part of our art. Our art is going to ask us to be vulnerable and to share the art with the world, or even just to share it with one person. Our art is going to ask us to dig deep and get to know ourselves and really pull from a spacious part of ourselves into our art. And I just want to remind you to be courageous with it. Don't play small with your art, because the world really, really needs it. And I don't know you particularly, or maybe I do, but what I definitely know of humanity is that we have a lot to offer. We just have to remember that we have a lot to offer. I know that's easy to forget when we get into our heads, or we get into our lives and we get comfortable. But hell, nothing good is really good if you're comfortable. I mean, imagine like you hiking a really ridiculous mountain, and then you're coming down from that mountain and getting yourself an ice cream. Won't that ice cream taste so much better than if you were to just drive to the ice cream place, right? It's like everything that is good and nourishing comes because we took a risk, because we got uncomfortable, because we took our art seriously. So as you're listening to this conversation with Chris about, embodied creativity and specifically about self-expression, I want you to think about your own art. I want you to think about how creative you've allowed yourself to be, because we're all creative beings. So where's the limitation there? Where are your thoughts around self-expression? How do you feel when you are most self-expressed? And how can you bring that into your life more often? What holds you back from radical self-expression or from believing in your art enough to put it out into the world? Like, what's there? What's missing there? Think about these things as you're listening to Chris, because I'm telling you, things started to really change in my life when I started to take my art seriously. And I will say, it's not just about making money or recognition. It's about a deep honoring. It's about saying to ourselves, yeah, I'm going to meet this need. I'm going to support myself in this way. I'm going to give myself the permission to be superfluous and buy the millionth canvas if it means that I get to paint a little bit longer. Yeah? We want to be kind to our art. We want to be strong and resilient and courageous, but mostly we want to honor it. So that's what I want you to think about. And if you're listening and you're like, I don't have an art. Yes, you do. Who you are is a form of art. There is no one else like you in this entire planet. So you, in and of itself, is art form. It is a miracle. And how are you treating yourself? Are you treating yourself as a miracle? Are you investing in your heart? Are you investing in your fullest expression so you can birth forth not just the art of your existence, but the art of your fullest self? Chris and I talk a lot about self-expression, so it'll give you some more things to think about. Chris is amazing. When I finished interviewing Chris for the podcast, I knew immediately that I wanted her to be a guest teacher on Worthy Women Rise, because her knowledge of creativity and self-expression is quite it's an art form. It's beautiful. She knows so much about this stuff. Let me read you her bio. Chris Zydel, also known as the Wild Heart Queen, is founder of Creative Juices Arts. She has over 38 years of experience as a compassionate creativity guide and an unshakable faith in the power of unbridled self-expression to heal hearts and change lives. She knows deep in her bones that everyone is deeply, wonderfully, and gloriously creative and is on a relentless, love-soaked mission to prove that to the world. She performs this magic by providing nurturing and joy-filled creative sanctuaries overflowing with freedom, permission, and trust in the sacred energies of wisdom, love, intuition, and truth that live inside all of us. I'm telling you, Chris is amazing, and this conversation is amazing, and it will give you much to think about when it comes to self-expression and embodied creativity. So let's bring her on. All right, Chris, welcome to Reclaim. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here, Thais. Thank you for inviting me to be on your fabulous podcast show. So.
Well, I don't know who recommended that I connect with you or how you came into my sphere, but the minute I started to read your posts online, I felt this energy, this sense of knowing that you carry and that you have. And it's just, I know that this is going to be a really good conversation. And so I'm so grateful that you made some time to join me.
Yeah, well, I love the work that you're doing in the world. And I love how you're inviting, people to come and really speak about these really important issues. And so I'm thrilled to be part of this journey with you and what you're creating. You're creating something really powerful and good. Thank you.
It is. This podcast is really powerful and good. It's beyond me. It's something that I'm so pleasantly surprised with how it's unfolded and the conversations that have arisen from it. And speaking of, something that I really admire and respect with you and your work is your relationship with creativity. It feels like it's a dance. And this is something that I've been navigating a lot of. I'm extremely creative and intellectual, and they tend to sometimes battle it out. And
right.
and
I get it.
there's so much that we can unpack around creativity and worthiness, and there's a sense of entitlement that comes with being creative. The sense of you are making a mark in the world, and who are you to be making a mark in the world? So I want to get in. Why don't we start with, what does creativity mean to you? What does that look like for you?
Well, I mean, I have this relationship with the creative process and the creative flow, which is, it's, for me, it's a lot about trust, and it's trusting that there's this greater energy. I mean, it has a spiritual kind of a component to it for me.
Yeah.
And, it's, so first of all, everybody's creative. I mean, we are creative beings. We were born out of this creative soup. We're in relationship to creativity all the time. And, so my work in the world is really to help to remind people of that and help give them permission to reclaim that relationship, which is always there and which has gotten damaged, through all kinds of, conditioning and the patriarchy and all kind of bullshit, so my work is really as a, kind of a midwife, to help people to, again, reclaim their relationship to the creative force and flow and energy and all that kind of thing. And so for me, it's really about accessing that energy of invention and exploration and making things up, and that kind of divine connection to like greater wisdom, because I think creativity is really very, very much connected to that. It's about play, I mean, so much of creativity is about allowing yourself to play and to kind of reconnect to that child in all of us, so yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
no, this is beautiful. Yeah. Well, I'm curious, you said trust. Creativity requires trust. Why do you think that people have that propensity to distrust their creativity and to not even feel like they are creative?
Well, I think, so the thing about feeling like they're not creative, I mean, there's so many messages in this culture about what it means to be creative, and so that the creativity becomes this rarefied thing, and that creativity gets really very tangled up with commerce. And, so it's like you're only seen to be creative if you can make money at it, or if you're famous at it, or, the creativity is this thing that it's also associated with a certain capacity for like what people call talent or skill or that kind of thing, and there's only certain skill sets that are considered to be valuable. So, creativity is so much broader than that. And you can be creative, doing all kinds of things, but so there's certain things that are valued in this culture, like if like in terms of painting, for example, or art, you have to have certain skills, you have to be realistic or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people feel left out of that. It's like, well, if I can't do that, then that means I'm not being creative. And it's like, no, those things have nothing to do with creativity. Creativity is about your self-expression, so it's really about expressing what's real and what's authentic for you, and how it comes through you. And the thing that I love about creativity is that it's so unique and it's so individual, and so if people think they have to put themselves in a box and fit in with what, is expected of them creatively, then they can feel like they're failing, like, oh, I'm not creative in that way, so that means I'm not creative at all.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, that I really try to help people with around like opening the door to that and opening up the definition, expanding the definition of what creativity is. It's not just people that make paintings that sell for thousands of dollars or whatever,
Yeah.
And then the trust piece is really about trusting in how your creativity manifests. It's really trusting in your own your own expression and who you are, because your creativity that's part of what's so scary about it, because there's a vulnerability associated with it,
Yes.
So for me to be fully creative means that I need to express myself and show myself, so there's a visibility aspect to it.
Yeah.
And that means that, I mean, you and I think you mentioned this earlier, that thing about self-worth, or really being able to value that how I express myself, how this comes through me is really worthwhile,
Yeah.
and really valuable. So that's the trust piece. It's really trusting in your uniqueness,
Yeah.
or your weirdness. I mean, that's another way of talking about it,
Yeah.
your quirkiness, because like when I have people come into my studio and like all kinds of things happen, and there's always that thing like, whoa, is this okay? I mean, can I really say this? Can I really express myself that way? And the answer, of course, is always yes.
Yeah.
We don't get that from the culture at large. We
Definitely
don't get that
not.
yes.
No, definitely not. I'm
Yeah.
curious what your story is with creativity. Have you always been having a creative dance with your creativity, or is that something that came from some type of hardship? Like, tell us your story.
Okay. Yeah. My story is that I I had two parents. Both of my parents were very gifted. They both had gifts. My mother had this beautiful singing voice, and my father was gifted around art. He could draw things and make them look really good, and I grew up in a working class family, and so there wasn't any support or value. I mean, people could recognize it like, oh, that's kind of nice that you can do that, but there was no real like, oh yeah, let's really develop this in you. Let's really honor this in you. So they were both really brokenhearted. There was a lot of heartbreak in both of them because their creative gifts. And my mother was also a beautiful writer. She was a beautiful poetess. And so they were not seen. There wasn't that sense of sacred recognition that they were given, by their people. So I was born into that. I was born into that heartbreak. I was born into that environment where I could feel their grief. I could feel how they were, the grief that they had around, they had the sacred part of them that they so wanted to express, and there wasn't much room for it. So then I had my own, so then I wasn't seen. I have a story where I loved horses when I was growing up, and we couldn't have a horse, but I had books of horses, and I had this one book that had these beautiful paintings of horses, and I wanted some paints so I could start copying these paintings because I thought they were just so cool. And my father kept telling me he was going to bring home the paints for me, because I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8. I couldn't go to the store myself, and he kept forgetting. And I realized in hindsight, it was so painful for him because he had such a wound around not being able to do that for himself. He couldn't give it to me, So that was a way that I felt disappointed and really let down, and my heart was broken, around that. So I didn't come to it until, and really reclaiming it until I started painting when I was in my 30s, and then I didn't really start writing until I'm 65 now. I didn't really start doing my writing until maybe 11 years ago, So I'm a late bloomer.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, speaking of heartbreak, I feel like we have a cultural heartbreak around art and creativity. It's almost like we're being created to be robots in the capitalistic system.
Yep.
And
that's right.
Even how the allocation of budget goes to elementary schools and middle schools, and arts program is the first thing to be cut. And I just want to sit in that heartbreak for a minute, because how much we are missing out on by the fact that people feel so wounded around their inability to be seen for their creative gifts.
Yeah. Right. And I really want to thank you for that. Thank you for making that space to
Yeah.
just be there, because it's so real. It's so real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems to have gotten worse. I mean, at least when I was a kid growing up, it was still, we still had art
Yeah.
in school. And like you said, the whole capitalistic, system, it's like it doesn't value it unless it can make a lot of money,
Yeah.
unless you can be a superstar of some sort or another. But to just honor everyday creativity,
Yeah.
just doesn't happen. And it's such a huge loss. It's such a huge loss. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and so for me, in my desire to navigate creativity, I've noticed how often my intellect gets in the way,
Mm,
where if I don't feel like my writing or my expression is perfect or is
yes.
aligned in a way that gets a lot of likes or receives a lot of feedback,
Mhm.
positive feedback, then it's almost worthless.
Yes, yes,
And
yes,
so
right.
I'm curious your perspective on on how we can get out of our way of our art and
Yeah.
allow it to move through us instead of have so much expectation placed on
Mhm.
it.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting that you call it your intellect, because the way that I frame what you're describing
Yeah,
isn't intellect so much as it is the inner critic or
yeah,
the judging mind,
yeah,
um, that part of us that feels like we're not of value unless we're absolutely perfect, which is like impossible. It's not even a real thing. But um, and there's a woman, I don't know if you know of her work. Her name is Rona Dietrich, but she wrote an article not too long ago that she said the inner critic is the patriarchy. And it was like,
mm,
holy fuck.
mm-hmm,
I mean, that's
mm-hmm,
just so right on, I mean, it's the way that we've all internalized that,
yeah,
and the patriarchy really demands that we be perfect,
yes,
that we can't be human, that we can't be messy, that we can't be fluid, we can't be all of those things that we really are as human beings, so um so the one of the things, so the thing, um when I work with my own creativity and when I work with other people around their creativity, it's so that this thing that you're talking about, it is being in your head, I mean, it's very much kind of like caught up in those uh kind of those constructs, those intellectual constructs. So part of working with it is becoming more embodied with it,
mm,
so bringing creativity down into the body. And even when you're writing, because like when I write, um, I'm really feeling as I'm writing,
yeah,
like I'm really trying to connect up with, I mean, I'm expressing ideas and I'm articulating that, but I'm also really, I do my best writing when I'm connected up with my heart,
yeah,
or my body. So that's one way of working with this. So one way is to recognize it for what it is. It's like, it's just, this patriarchal bullshit, so to try, like I really teach my students to not pay attention to that, to not let that take over, and then the other thing is to really come into that place of embodiment and really trusting in your own feelings and what feels, alive and juicy and authentic for you. I mean, does that help? Does that?
yes. No, I think that that's potent, and I think
Yeah.
that that's where the courage comes in,
Yes.
right?
Exactly.
When
Right.
we can get into our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
the we can lean into the fear
Yes. Yes.
and not make it mean all the things that we make it mean when we're in our head.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. Because there's just so much. I mean, again, when I'm doing my best creative work, whether it's painting or writing or whatever it is, like it's an expression of what's true for me. And sometimes what's true for me is the fear, you know. Sometimes what's true for me is the grief. Sometimes what's true for me is the rage, I mean, all of those things that need expression. And so, but I have to be connected up to my feelings in my body to make that happen. And the thing about that judging mind or that inner critic, it's threatened by that. It's threatened by us being fully embodied and fully alive.
Absolutely.
And so the more we start to tap into that, that's when it gets all like, Wah! And starts yelling,
Yeah.
Getting really noisy.
Yeah.
So I also try to, whenever I hear that voice, I try to remember it's like, oh, it's feeling really threatened right now because I'm about to risk something. I'm about to go into a place inside of myself that's maybe scary for me to express. I'm taking a risk here. I'm taking a risk to be courageous around something, And so that helps me too, to be like, okay, you wouldn't be getting this upset if I weren't doing something really courageous.
Yes. Let's talk about courage, because it definitely goes in hand to hand that if we want our creativity out into the world, which doesn't, first off, let's pause. There's no need, there's no reason, there's no pressure to have to put our
right.
out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that we are finding a calling to put it out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
That requires a lot of courage to be ourselves and to take a stand for this work.
That's right.
So I'm curious what you've seen to be the ways that you've navigated this need to be courageous while also honoring the fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the thing for me, so every time, especially, because like my artwork is more private, I don't show that hardly ever, really. And it's just, that's fine. I don't really have a desire for that. I don't have a need for that. But my writing is really my public expression of creativity. So there is that thing about whenever I'm putting that out there, all of those things came up, like you were talking about earlier. It's like, oh my God, how is this going to be received? And am I going to get responded to? And will it just be ignored? Will it be irrelevant? Will it touch people? Like all of those questions come up for me. And so there's the fear. There's the fear that that won't happen, that I'll either be responded to by not being responded to, which is very painful just in and of itself, or maybe responded to in a negative way, or maybe people will be offended by what I say. Especially, recently, and I think a lot of us are having this experience, speaking out about things that are more controversial and that are more charged, and that are potentially more triggering.
Yes.
And so I notice, like, and this is kind of a clue for me. Like there's times that I'll write things and there's part of me that's like, are you really going to publish that?
Yeah.
Are you really going to put that out there? And the more I feel that way, the more I know that I have to, because I know that that there's something important in what I'm saying because it's coming from some authentic place in me.
Yeah.
And I know that it's really very likely to touch people. And those pieces that I'm the most afraid to publish are most of the time the ones that get the greatest response, because I've risked a certain level of vulnerability in myself. I've risked telling a truth about something that is maybe taboo to talk about, like rage or grief or, power, being powerful. But when I do that, when I take that risk, so that's one of the things that keeps me going too, is that when I take that risk and feeling like I really connect, because it's really about making that connection with other people, and get responded to from that place of connection, it reminds me, it's like, okay, to do it again next time, that it's okay to do it again next time, It feeds that,
Yeah. So have you ever written something that you ended up regretting, or looking back and thinking, or maybe it received some negative pushback that you didn't anticipate?
I've definitely been receiving more negative pushback recently, because I'm venturing into like a lot of us, which, and again, I'm so appreciative of people like you. And, there's a lot more people in my chosen community that are doing that kind of work. So that's something that I think we support each other that way. Okay, Thais is doing it, I can do it. I mean, that's the other thing too, that one of the things that is really helpful is that the more courageous any of us can be, it helps us all to be more courageous, Um, and so, so I definitely have been getting, and sometimes it's like things I wouldn't even anticipate getting a pushback around, but it's like, okay.
But you're still around. Look, you're still breathing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you're still eating, right? You look ravishing.
Thank you, darling. You're such a love. Well, I haven't had anything. I've definitely had people get mad, or argue with me, or get offended. I've had people unfriend me and block me on Facebook. Like, oh, that's happened.
Yeah.
I haven't had anything really scary happen that I hear happens for other people. Like, I've never been threatened.
Yeah.
So, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
I know that kind of thing goes on.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that hasn't happened. But I've definitely had people get really pissed off.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is really for people that are listening who are so afraid of putting themselves out there.
Yes.
For fear of what people will think.
Yes.
So many women come to me being like, I can't say that. I can't do that because what are they going to think? And then they become so paralyzed by that.
Yes.
And so I guess I'm making an example that here's someone,
yes,
who is talking about things that are uncomfortable,
yes,
and have received, sometimes negative pushback, mostly not, right? But in
mostly
those
not.
Moments,
yeah,
you're still around and you're still thriving. And
yes, absolutely.
I think that makes, just like what you said, when one person can be courageous,
yes,
inspires a lot of us to be courageous. And if you're listening, this is now the time to be tapping into your creativity. This is the time to be courageous in your art. We need that more than ever before. More than ever before.
Absolutely. And, it's kind of like, the other thing is that whenever I get the pushback, I engage with, unless somebody's like a total asshole, but a lot of times people are like confused, or they just don't understand, or they just are getting triggered. And I will have a conversation with them, and it helps me to get clarity about what it is that I'm trying to say too. So I really appreciate the pushback. But yeah, for those people that are listening, that pushback is not going to kill you. And it's that thing, like we all need to learn to be more resilient. And not feel, because again, I think sometimes as women, we feel crushed by that. Like, oh my God, somebody's going to be offended, or somebody isn't going to like me. But that's part of the patriarchal, conditioning that we're all kind of trying to free ourselves of, so that it's like, no, it's important that you speak your truth. And if somebody gets upset, that's their problem. That's not, you haven't done anything.
So let's talk about the connection between creativity and inspiration.
Yes. Yes. So what about that?
It's just, I notice myself feeling uncreative when I'm not inspired.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then when I'm inspired, I feel all sorts of creative. And so I feel like my attachment to being inspired, prison, it's like putting my creativity in a prison.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful way of putting it. So, one of the things, this is where creative practice comes in, where, so one of the things that I do for myself, and one of the things that I teach, like when I work with students and stuff, is that you can be creative no matter what state you're in. So you can be creative if you're cranky, you can be creative if you're tired, you can be creative if you're uninspired, you can be creative if you're frustrated. Anything, it's kind of using the energy of wherever you are to be creative. And I'm surprised sometimes because I have the practice, so I have the practice of kind of writing no matter what will come out during those times when I think I'm uninspired.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people like who will come to work with me and they're like, well, I'm waiting to be inspired. And it's been 6 months since I've done anything creative, or
Right.
sometimes longer, Um, so that I think what you said earlier was just really right on, that demand for inspiration can be a shackle. It can be a prison, and so this is where the trust comes in, to trust that you're creative, that capacity to be creative and that capacity to tap into creative flow can happen under any circumstances. It doesn't need, it's not like a delicate flower where it just needs like a special hothouse thing, it's much more robust than that, it really is.
Yeah. And I feel like, again, it's the same thing about that sense of resiliency. It's that,
Mm-hmm.
I think we walk around feeling so scared of everything all the time.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
And what if we were to trust, I think this is your word now, what if we were to trust our creativity, trust our resilience, trust the fact that, getting pushback on the internet doesn't define our worth and doesn't define our goodness, and how creative you are also doesn't define your goodness. And that's all the patriarchal inner critic voice.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, because that's the other thing too. It's like, my attitude towards my creativity is that I am in service to it, so it's not even about me so much, it's like my muse, or whatever you want to call it, is asking me to express myself in certain ways. And in a certain way, none of that is any of my business.
Right.
How it gets expressed, how it comes out, how good it is, whatever it is, whatever value judgment I have on it doesn't really matter. What matters is that I make room for it and I make space for it, and that I don't shut it down by having an opinion about it, or having a judgment about it, so that's the practice of like getting out of your way, out of your own way, to just allow the creative flow to come through you, because it's always there and it's always available to you. So all the other stuff that you're talking about, which is the fear, the conditioning, the patriarchal, kind of oppression, that we all have internalized, are all those things that get in the way of the creative flow. So part of the work is being aware of that stuff, and being able to name it. I mean, because I think it's I think it's really powerful to say, that the inner critic is the patriarchy. I mean, this isn't, because people will get confused and think it's them, and it's like, no, this isn't you. This isn't your voice. It's really something that's been put on you. You're being oppressed by this. This is internalized oppression,
Right.
around your creative process. So I think sometimes being able to name that and go, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be living from that place, can really help. And like you said, the thing about the fear is, like, everything that I'm ever afraid of never happens. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. Like, I'm like, oh, if I do this, or I put this out, this horrible thing, even the pushback that happens, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's people getting cranky. And like I said, sometimes people will block me or unfriend me on Facebook, and it's like, oh, well, c'est la vie, that opens it up for better friends to come in.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think the hardest thing when it comes to expressing our creativity is not just the loss of the strangers who, block us or whatever, but the loss of intimate friends and family, and the judgment that can come from really being ourselves.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to speak on that a little bit, because if you're taking creativity to the level of just even being who you truly are meant to be.
Yes.
Whatever gender, whatever sexuality, whatever look, whatever that is for you.
Right. That's right.
That is being a creative, self-expressed version of yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, that's a real thing, I mean, it can be it can be threatening. Your real self can be threatening to the people that are your family, or your friends. I mean, one of the things that I really encourage people to do as a way to offset some of that is to create a community for yourself that can really support you in being who you are. I mean, because there might be certain things like there's like certain people in my family. Well, now that I'm on Facebook, I don't even care. And, I'm old now, so I don't really care about any of that. But, but when I was younger, I did have more concerns about like, my family always thought I was weird, and they still do, but now it doesn't matter as much. But part of that was I developed a new family. I brought new people in. I developed these circles of support and celebration and sacred recognition and acknowledgement for my real self. And I think that that's really critical. You can't do this work alone. You can't be isolated with it. You can't do it in a vacuum. This whole the need for community around this is critical, is crucial. So that's what I really recommend for people. And you can also protect yourself. I mean, I know if you're going to be, I know there's certain things that are harder to hide. I mean, if you really want to come out like as a gender changing or that kind of thing, that's going to be harder to hide. And so that's where you really need community, and you really need support, to hold you in that. But there's other things, like maybe you don't show everybody in your family your art or your paintings, and you just have that be for the people that can really support you and acknowledge you and, celebrate you, as a way to get stronger with it so that then you can bring it out into the world.
I love that. Thank you for that. I want to go on a totally different tangent real quick.
That's okay.
Totally different.
Go for it, girl.
Tell me about your relationship with astrology, because
that's great. Yeah, that's fun.
Chris, your dissection, I guess is the word that's coming into my mind right now, of astrology is so good.
Thank you.
I read your post on Scorpio, Scorpio season, and I'm Scorpio rising, Scorpio moon, Scorpio Pluto.
Oh wow. Oh good. So you're really got a big dose.
Oh yeah. And so I felt all the feels around that post. And I would just love to know a little bit more about where that comes from, your interest with that and how that's developed over time, and anything you want to share around your relationship with astrology.
Oh yeah, great. Oh, but that's so fun. Because that doesn't usually come up in these interviews. So that's actually really fun. Yeah, I love astrology. I mean, it's been part of my life since I was in my 20s. So it's, 40 some years. And I, it's this, so it's working very directly with archetypal energy, with this like very, powerful, kind of templates and, that are universal, that we can really tap into. And each of the signs is some aspect of that. And I love how empowering it can be, to really, it's another way to see yourself. It's another way, because like when people come and get astrology readings from me, they walk away going, oh my God, I feel like you've seen me. You've really seen like all of the hidden aspects of me and all of these parts of me that I'm afraid to bring out. And, and so that's one of the things that's so powerful about it for me, because it's one of those systems that can give you a very powerful sense of, self-recognition, and can help to support you to express yourself for who you really are. So, I mean, it's kind of seems like it's different from my other work, but it really isn't, It's all kind of the same thing. And, I mean, the way that I do astrology, I also have a background as a psychotherapist, So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I was a psychotherapist for, I don't know, 25 years or something, a long time. So, the way that I approach astrology has a very deep psychological component, so it's really understanding people on a very deep psychological level. And then also the spiritual component of like, how can you expand into being this archetype in its fullest expression, you know. And so, yeah, and I love studying it. I love reading about it. I love writing about it. I love doing readings for people. You know, I love helping people. Like you said, when you read that thing, the Scorpio thing, it resonated with you. You saw yourself in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, you know, I love that work for that reason, because it's like each of the signs is so beautiful and so powerful and so rich. And I really want people to be able to claim all that for themselves. So anyway.
I love it. I feel like that is, I think what you embody well is this allowance of yourself to have all sorts of creative facets in your life and not feel like you need to box in or brand yourself in a certain way that annihilates a part of yourself, and you allow it all to be who you are. I think you modeled that very beautifully.
Oh, thank you, Thais. I really appreciate you saying that, because that's my work. That's what I live. And so, you know, I mean, I think, again, it's important, if you're going to be doing this work, that you walk your talk. I mean, it's the whole integrity piece is also critical. But that's when people come to work with me, that's what they get. You know, like I just had this one woman who, she's been working with me. I used to do a retreat in New Mexico every year, and she came for many years in a row. And she said the first time that she came, she was like, is there really permission for me to be fully who I am? You know? And so she was like, I'm going to show you this part of me, you know, like almost like as a challenge, you know? And she was like, and what you said to me is that all you got? Show me more, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's that joyful invitation into being fully who you are and fully self-expressed with all of the different aspects of your being. And that's what we need to heal the world. We need that, you know, because again, we've gotten so hurt and so shamed and so wounded around, like, oh, I can't do this and I can't be that and I can't say that and I can't feel that. And then so much of our energy just gets all gnarled up. So the work that I do and the work that I know other people are doing in this realm is that freedom. Absolutely. To be so fully alive, and then we can support each other to be that fully alive, and it's just fabulous.
I love it. Any final thoughts?
I think the main thing is just to make space for it, you know, to really encourage people to claim their creativity by devoting time and energy to it, you know, because it's like anything else, you know, it's that thing where what you value is what you pay attention to. You know, like your attention is love, you know, love made manifest. So love your creativity, you know, love your creativity by giving it attention, you know, and making space for it. And however it manifests, and get support and find people who can really stand by you and with you and celebrate you and have fun with it.
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your creative brilliance with the Reclaim community. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much, Thais. This was just a joy and a wonder. And thank you for doing the beautiful work that you do in the world. It's so necessary. Mwah.
Thank you. Chris and I had a lot of thoughts around embodied creativity and self-expression. And now we want to hear yours. Come hang out with us on Facebook. You can find Chris at chris.zydel and me at IamThaisSky. And if you want to check out more of Chris's work, go to www.creativejuicearts.com. And as always, you can learn more about me and my work at www.thaissky.com. See you next week.